250 years ago, the Founding Fathers were able to procure a framework for a society where the government serves the people, not the other way around. Since then, our republic has become the epicenter for democratic thought, freedom, and liberty. However, most Americans can agree that the political process is in long need of an overhaul. Let's begin with gerrymandering. Locally, the structuring of districts allows corruption to inject itself directly into our political processes. When politicians are allowed to draw their own district boundaries, they effectively choose their voters instead of the other way around. This undermines the very foundation of representative democracy. The solution to this is the implementation of a neutral algorithm that determines district lines based solely on population and geography, not political advantage. Originally, the House of Representatives was designed to guarantee equal representation for every American. Over time, however, population disparities between districts have eroded that balance. Today, some congressional districts represent vastly different numbers of citizens, giving certain areas disproportionate influence. To solve this, each state should be divided into districts rounded to the nearest million residents. Each district, representing roughly 1 million Americans, would elect one member to the House of Representatives. This would restore fairness of representation and align with the principle of one person, one vote. Nationally, one of the Founding Fathers' greatest oversights is the Electoral College. There is no compelling argument for why a vote in one state should carry more weight than a vote in another. The concept that a single vote in Wyoming can count nearly 3 times as much as one in California defies logic and equality. In a modern democracy, continuing to use such a flawed system is indefensible. The abolition of the Electoral College and a transition to a national popular vote is the only way to ensure that every citizen's vote counts equally, regardless of where they live. Additionally, Election Day should be designated a national holiday, and these are things that most Americans can agree upon. Voting is not only a civic right, but a civic duty, and it should be treated as such. Making Election Day a national holiday would increase voter participation by removing barriers for working Americans and reaffirm the importance of democratic participation as a cornerstone of our national identity. Within Congress, another serious issue lies in the use of omnibus bills. This is why you see the government shutdown about the budget bill right now. These massive, multi-issue pieces of legislation obscure transparency and erode trust in government. They're so large and they contain so many different points that both sides can't vote to agree on anything. Frequently, a bill is introduced on one subject, like immigration reform, but hidden within its thousands of pages are unrelated provisions about taxes, environmental regulations, or even corporate subsidies. This practice misleads the public and forces representatives to either accept or reject entire bundles of unrelated policies in a single vote. And like I mentioned, this leads to a gridlock, which leads to the government shutdown. The solution is simple: to require one-page, single-issue bills in Congress. Each single piece of legislation should address only one policy matter. This would eliminate the manipulation that allows controversial or unpopular measures to be buried inside unrelated bills. To enforce this reform, the Senate should propose a constitutional amendment limiting all legislation to a single issue. Once ratified, the Supreme Court would have the authority to enforce the rule through precedent, defining clear standards for what qualifies as a single issue. This change would ensure transparency, accountability, and genuine debate on every law that affects the American people. Finally, one of the most damaging Supreme Court rulings in modern history is Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. You might have heard politicians, namely Bernie Sanders, talk about this decision. It basically equated political donations with free speech, allowing corporations and wealthy individuals to flood elections with money and effectively drown out the voices of ordinary citizens. As a result, our political system no longer operates on the will of the people, but on the influence of those who can afford to buy it. If we want to restore democracy to the people, the most important step is to overturn Citizens United. Political donations should be viewed as financial transactions, not protected speech. To reduce corruption and restore fairness, individual donations should be capped at $10,000 per candidate per year, and corporate donations should be subject to the same limitation. Every dollar contributed to a campaign, whether by a person, a corporation, or an organization, should be made publicly accessible information. Additionally, foreign corporations and entities should be prohibited entirely from donating to United States campaigns. Transparency in campaign finance is essential. The American people have a right to know who is funding their leaders and shaping their policies. Only once, when we remove the influence of unchecked money, can we ensure that elections reflect the collective voice of the citizens, not the power of the wealthy. By addressing the four aforementioned reforms, which were neutral districting, abolishing the Electoral College, enforcing single-issue legislation, and overturning Citizens United, can we begin to restore integrity and equality to American democracy. Each of these changes targets a structural flaw that has allowed corruption, manipulation, and inequality to take root in our system. Together, they would return power where it belongs, back to the people.